Today, we delve into the intriguing history of law enforcement, starting with the roots of British common law. Born in medieval England, British common law was a system of law that emerged from customs and judicial precedents, rather than statutes. It was a unique legal framework designed to ensure justice and order, becoming the bedrock for Britain's legal system. Under this system, laws were not written down, but were based on societal norms and previous court decisions. It was a dynamic system, flexible and adaptable, capable of evolving with societal changes. What truly makes it fascinating, though, is its profound influence across the pond. When the first colonists set foot on American soil, they brought with them the principles of British common law. This legal heritage profoundly shaped the American legal system, particularly in the realm of law enforcement. As we will see, this British influence laid the groundwork for the development of law enforcement in America. The first modern police force, known as the Bobbies, emerged in Britain in the 19th century. This was no accident, but rather a well-thought-out initiative by Sir Robert Peel, who established the Metropolitan Police Service in London in 1829. The term Bobbies was coined as a nod to Sir Robert's first name. The creation of the Bobbies marked a significant shift in the approach to law enforcement. Instead of simply reacting to crime, the Bobbies were designed to prevent it, patrolling the streets and maintaining a visible presence in the community. This proactive approach was a game changer, laying the groundwork for modern policing as we know it. The Bobbies also set a precedent for the uniformed, salaried police force, accountable to the public and operating under a code of ethics. The Bobby model of policing, with its emphasis on prevention rather than reaction, was soon to cross the Atlantic to the United States. In the early days of America, law enforcement looked quite different than it does today. The nascent nation didn't have a formal police force. Instead, it relied on a patchwork of informal systems, with night watches, sheriffs, and constables playing key roles in maintaining order. Night watches, for instance, were one of the earliest forms of law enforcement in America. These were volunteer groups who patrolled the streets after dark, keeping an eye out for fires and crime. However, these watches weren't always reliable, as they were often made up of unwilling participants drafted into service. Sheriffs and constables, on the other hand, were slightly more formal roles. These positions were often filled by elected or appointed individuals who were tasked with a variety of duties, from collecting taxes to serving warrants and dealing with minor infractions. But as American cities grew, these systems started to show their limitations. Law enforcement needed a more organized approach to keep pace with the changing times. This led to the adoption of a more formalized system, inspired by the Bobby model of law enforcement from across the pond in Britain. The first American city to establish a full-time paid police force was Boston in the year 1838. This was a significant departure from the voluntary and part-time systems that had been in place. Now, law enforcement was a professional occupation, with officers who were accountable to the city and its citizens. These early police forces weren't without their challenges. There was resistance from those who saw them as an infringement on individual liberties, and there were also issues with corruption. But over time, they became an accepted and integral part of American society. The establishment of formal police forces marked a significant shift in American law enforcement. This was the beginning of a journey towards the system we have today, a system that continues to evolve and adapt to the needs of a complex and diverse nation. As America grew and changed, so too did its approach to law enforcement. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the birth of modern policing as we know it, but this didn't happen overnight. One of the most significant changes in American law enforcement was the creation of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the FBI, in 1908. This was a response to the growing need for a national investigative body to handle crimes that crossed state lines. The FBI's birth marked a new era in law enforcement, one where federal agencies would play an increasingly important role alongside local police departments. But it wasn't just the organizational structure of law enforcement that was evolving. The tools of the trade were changing too. The introduction of police cars in the early 20th century marked a significant shift. No longer were officers bound by how far they could walk or ride on horseback. Now they could cover greater distances in less time. And with the advent of police radios in the 1930s, communication between officers and their departments became instant, leading to faster response times and a greater level of coordination. Then came the digital age. New technologies from computers to body cameras have revolutionized law enforcement. They've allowed for better record keeping, increased transparency, and more efficient crime solving. But they've also brought new challenges, like cybercrime, that law enforcement must adapt to. And let's not forget the shift towards community policing. This approach, which emphasizes building relationships with local communities to prevent crime, has become a cornerstone of modern American law enforcement. It's a far cry from the days of the Bobby, but it shows how policing has evolved to meet the changing needs of society. Over the centuries, American law enforcement has continually evolved, reflecting societal changes and advancements. It's a fascinating journey, one that shows how our approach to maintaining law and order has changed with the times. Let's draw together the threads of this fascinating journey through the history of law enforcement. Our tale begins with the influence of British common law, a legal system that placed the power of law enforcement in the hands of ordinary citizens. This citizen-based approach to maintaining law and order was the foundation upon which later systems would build. With the watch and ward system, the responsibility of ensuring the peace rested on the community, a concept that echoes even in today's law enforcement practices. Then we moved on to the birth of the Bobby, an innovation of Sir Robert Peel in the 19th century. Named after him, the Bobbies marked a shift from community-based law enforcement to a more professional, organized force. Peel's principles of law enforcement, emphasizing the importance of crime prevention and public approval, set the stage for modern policing. Across the pond, early American law enforcement began to take shape. Drawing from their British roots, fledgling American communities adopted the watch and ward system. As towns grew into bustling cities, this system gradually evolved. The need for a more structured and consistent approach led to the creation of the first American police force in Boston in the mid-19th century. We then charted the evolution of American law enforcement. From its humble beginnings in Boston, the model of a professional police force spread across the country. This growth, however, was not without its challenges. The struggle to balance law enforcement power with individual rights has been a defining theme in the evolution of American policing. From the introduction of police radios in the 1930s to the civil rights movement in the 1960s, each era has left its mark on the shape and function of law enforcement. The history of law enforcement in America is a complex tapestry woven from many threads, each reflecting a different part of our nation's past and giving shape to the law enforcement we know today.